Well, God bless you. If you're watching this as a pastor that has come to the place where you've served for 25 or 35 or 40, or in my case, 45 years, and you're saying, okay, God, I'm looking at commonly called retirement or pastor emeritus, where you're still seen as the founder of the church that you've been a part of for so long. But nevertheless, everything is changing. You're crossing over into a new area. How do you do that? And it hasn't really been spelled out too well for most of us. And I found myself in a situation trying to sort it all out. How do I do this? What am I to do? The criterion for it, you can see with denominations, have some very specifics and some things that they do. But I just want to look at the scriptures and what does the Lord say, and how do the Calvaries do this, because most of our studies started in home studies and just grew from there. But it's important to make the transition and to make it smooth, pass the baton, if you will. In 2 Timothy, where Paul is saying, I charge you before God that you teach the word, you be in season and all of these things. But then he says something really quite interesting. In verse 6, he says, "For I am ready, being poured out as a drink offering, and at the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. Finally there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day, and not to me only, but also to all those who have loved his appearing." When we first come to the Lord, for a lot of us during the 70s, late 60s and 70s, of what they call the Jesus movement, and it was just looking for the Lord's appearing all the time, and that's kind of waned back and forth over the years of having that in our focus, that the Lord could come back at any time. But he says, for those that have finished the race and you're bringing in somebody new, if their eyes are on the Lord coming back at any time, they have the same reward as you do. And it's a good place to start, where there's this mutual respect of what's happening, that Jesus is the head of the church. It's his church, it's not ours. These are his decisions, not our decisions. And we seek those based upon, he could come back at any time. I mean, on one hand, we could die at any moment. On the other hand, and that would be a rapture. On the other hand, it'd be we're all caught up together. But the dead in Christ do rise first, and then those that are alive and remain will be caught up to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Well, I was, like I said, after 45 years, I started thinking about, how do you make this transition for emeritus or for passing the baton? And I thought, well, when I'm 80, I'll do that. And I felt like the Lord urging me, no, it's a process and you need to start now. And so I'm still thinking down the road kind of thing. And I thought, okay, let me make plans, Lord, for how this happens. I get it now. I've got to sort this thing out to literally not just disciple another pastor, which I've done over the years. We've had several Calvaries come out of Hosanna. But how do you disciple somebody to be the one to replace you? That's a little bit different. So I started thinking of how to do that. And then I went in for, yearly checkup and everything else. And gives me a call back, and he says, well, do you have something we want to do, take another blood test and some other things, because you have multiple myeloma, which is a cancer in the bone tissue. And eventually it just eats up the bones and you can't walk around and things happen. And I watched my dad die of that, so I'm familiar with it, multiple myeloma. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I said, Lord, you're giving me kind of a definitive time frame for this. I need to do it now. And so I started the process then of talking to Nathan Hamry, who would be my replacement, and telling him, look, I want to start giving you opportunities to do more in the pulpit and everything else, with the idea that I need to retire, and we're going to take this end of the year process to do that. Once I'd made that commitment to do that, I got a call back from the doctor. Several months have gone by, and he says, "Okay, let's do another test." He says, "Well," he says, you have multiple myeloma, but it's at the what they call smoldering stage, which means instead of 3 to 5 years to live, which is what he gave me the first time, he says, you've got more. We just don't know how long this is going to last, but you do have more time than that." And I'm thinking, "Lord, you're funny. I'm going to retire." "No, I'll wait." And the Lord goes, "No, you won't." So don't wait for something like that. Listen to the Lord, because you really don't know when you're going to pass. Since I was 40, I'm 75 now, and a lot of you at retirement age are looking at that between 60 and 70 and plus. I had started something, realizing that nobody's guaranteed tomorrow. I've seen pastors that I raised up that were younger than me, that served in the pulpit, like Roger Cochran and others, that died before me. And you realize that it's not about your age, it's about God's timing. And so I started appointing somebody each year to take my place. And the board knew it, and they agreed and said, "Okay, so if something happens during this year, this person will take my place." And I would do a little bit more discipling for that purpose. But there was always an awareness that this could happen. Then the following year, it'd be somebody else. And so for a while, I'd have 2 or 3 that possibly, okay, this year it's your turn kind of thing. And it was on the scaffolding here. In fact, in this building, we were working on it. And I was on the very top trying to fix something, because the guys didn't want to go up that high, and it was kind of rickety. And so I'm fixing it, and they're on the bottom, and they started shaking it. And they said, "Whose turn is it anyway?" And I thought, boy, I'm rushing the show here. But it helps when they know their culpability, their responsibility, and we know ours. And so I've been doing that for some time, and I encourage you to do that, because, hey, if you go for another 20 years, great. But if not, and it's 6 months from now and something happens, you have a stroke, or you're, whatever, that the church doesn't freak out. That Sunday, the person knows they're in the pulpit. They know what to do, and they're prepared for it. And I would tell the body, the first of every year, the first month of every year, by the way, it's Pastor Mike this year, or it's Pastor Nathan, or whoever, and it was rotating with a simplicity that everybody understood it. But as time got on, and now I'm at the place for that retirement, how do you fulfill that? He says, "I'm already poured out as a drink offering, but it's time to pass the baton so that you'll be looking forward to the return of the Lord." And people have a sense of that. So what I started was not only having the Pastor Nathan is the one taking my place, start signing the checks. Over a period of a couple of months, I started taking my name off of a lot of things. Eventually, by the end of the year, to take my name, out of the relationship with the board, so he would enter into that, and literally draw back with a sense of responsibility as a founding pastor, and not a problem with people in that sense of, who's doing what, but just the practicalities of how it's done, and explaining it to the board first of all, and going over what the policy is and how I was going to enter into it. And there's it's weird. I'll tell you, it's a little bit, at first, a kind of a fear of, what am I doing? How do I do this? And I remember my 8-year-old granddaughter was talking about demons and stuff, and she said, she was kind of like, "Oh, the demons are, there's all these games have demons and stuff in it." And, and I said, "Well, Jesus did with demons. He saw this guy, and he had filled with demons, and so he cast the demons out, and he put them in these pigs." And she's smiling. I said, and then he told the pigs, to go in the water, and they did, and they drowned. And she's laughing. And all of a sudden she says, I can just imagine. She got a great imagination. She says, the devil's standing there telling the other demons, I've got this box here and it's got all of God's fears in it. And they're all gathering around. Really? Oh, wow. What? And opened up the box. Ah! It's empty. And I just laughed. I thought, well, you're right. God doesn't have any fears. He knows the future. He knows what's going on. And so if we enter into that and realize, fear is not of the Lord, but power, love, and a sound mind. And okay, God, that box is empty. So I'm not going to overly concern myself with things that belong to God, and just make plans for the things that he wants to do that's healthy for the body. Again, church isn't ours. We teach that. We know that. But when it comes to Emeritus or passing that baton over, there's a lot of things we want to hold on to because that's so much a part of us. But we've always been the under shepherd. We've always been under Christ. And now it's like the Lord is saying, like he did with Moses, it's time. You're not going to cross over into this part of the promised land of this ministry. The Joshuas are going to do that. And they'll have their Jerichos and everything. You've trained them. But you're staying. And so I think it's appropriate for us to take that as an example, and then Paul follows up with it saying, hey, I'm spent. I've done everything I'm supposed to do. Now I'm passing it over to you. Preach the word. Stay in the word. Here's how you appoint elders. He lays it all out in such a very specific way. Why? Because he knew he wasn't going to be around to do it. So we gain from all of that. And we need to do that for those that are entering into it. The financial aspect of it is, if you're looking at retirement 10 years from now, 5 years from now, or 20 years from now, or if you're a brand new pastor and you're thinking, I don't have to worry about it, you need to. Time goes by so fast. 45 years is just gone like that. From the first day I had a home Bible study, Pastor Chuck said, would you do this study in Bellflower? And I said, yeah. And it's 5 people, and went down to 3 the first year, and then it grew from there, and several other churches after that it grew. But it's one of those things that the Lord's in charge. It's his church, and he's the one that gives it expansion and growth and maturity and everything else. It's not up to you. It's you just feed the flock. But when that time comes, you want to be prepared financially. And so if you haven't done it yet, whether it's a 401k or stocks and bitcoins or what, I'm not telling you what to do, buying gold or silver or all those things. There's so many options. I've got a little of all of it kind of thing. I said, well, one of them's got to work. But what you don't want to do is bury it or not invest. Because to the one who said, well done, thou good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of the Lord, he was talking to the one who is investing their money wisely. But you want to be able to take care of your kids' and your relationship. So it's a part of looking forward to the fact that you'll get to that point for you and for your family. And if you haven't, or you've done it in part, then what role does the church play in helping you as an emeritus? It's now laid out in our board direction exactly what's going to happen for the next pastor. If 25 years from now says I'm ready to retire, that there's already laid out for him a plan financially, and the board has been gracious with me to enter into that too. But you've got to talk to the board about it, and be prepared, and be prepared personally. Don't take it like, well, I'm not worried about that. The Lord's going to come back. Great, the Lord's going to come back, but be a doer of the word, not a hearer only. When it comes to finances, it's a big deal. No different than with the church, where you want to set money aside, for different projects. Well, your biggest project of your life is your, maintaining for your family financially in that way. If you haven't, and you're looking and saying, I've got maybe a month or 2 months or 3 months, worth of, to be able to pay, but I don't have enough to last a year or 5 years in retirement or 10 years. I didn't get Social Security. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. I mean, a lot of people, there was a time when, oh no, the government, Social Security, and so they didn't do Social Security. And so they've got no income coming from that investment. But they didn't, on the other hand, do any stocks or some other investment. So it's like, I got a few $1,000s in the bank kind of thing, but not a whole lot. What do you do? Well, one of the thoughts, and again, I'm not, I'm not going to give you specifics because this is something that you need to do. It's kind of like, again, my granddaughter, Jada, she's always got something for me. And I was trying to fill out some forms online, and I don't like doing that, and I'm not good at it, and I was getting frustrated with the thing. It's just, hitting the wrong thing and, all that stuff. And I was going, and I said, this is why I've always had secretaries. and Jada says to me, what? And I looked at her and I said, well, I have trouble, whether it's in script or even in computer sometimes, with just focusing on what it takes to fill all this stuff out. And so I've always had secretaries, and it's been good to, I could just, here, get this done, do this, and I didn't have to worry about it. It's a weakness with me. And she looks at me, she says, what am I, your therapist? and I says, well, I guess so. She goes, well, what do I do to get fired? I said, well, you're fired. Don't worry about it. But I'm not your therapist. Whatever the issues are and stuff, what I want to do is help you start thinking through the process of how to get where you need to be 5 years from now, or 2 months from now, or 10 years, whatever it is. But to start laying out a plan that works for you, for the board, for the church, all of that, and just not set it aside, but be diligent concerning those things. But one of the concepts you can use that is you can do a reverse mortgage on your house. You might have several $100,000 in your house, and you just go, well, I just want to get it paid off. God's country, is Blake's, Sheldon, this is God's, it's his land. But if that's an investment, you can do a reverse mortgage, and there's money for you that if you haven't saved up, that's one way to do it. And the kids will still inherit it, and they got a year to sell it, and all those other things. But the details would be worth looking into if you're saying, I can't afford to keep my house, the payments are too high. But if you did a reverse mortgage, you wouldn't have any payments. So there's just different ways of doing things that you want to investigate for yourself. If you've already planned it out, you're ready to go. And so the other process is in discipling the next generation. He says, I'm already poured out, but I fought the good fight, but there's, and it's not for me only, but the gift is given to all those who have loved his appearing. You want to have that relationship with the upcoming pastor, that they're looking at it in the same way that you have for years, and that is, be diligent with what you're doing in that day, because the Lord could come back at any time. And if that's the case, you'll always have one step after the other, one concept upon concept, precept upon precept of teaching your people, and then pretty soon, 25 years will go by for that person, or 40 or whatever, and they'll be able to look back and say, okay, I've done all that I can do. But it happens day by day, because the Lord could come back at any day. So you don't put things off, in other words. But to using the biblical context of this, that the person you're raising up really needs to know, if they don't already, that they're an under-shepherd, and it's his church. Now, along that line, if it's his church, then, and he's telling you it's time to go, it's not your place to decide otherwise. But how do you do it, whether it's now or 10 years from now or whatever? Going systematically through paperwork that you do, For me, I pass off to a secretary. So thankful for them. But whatever it is, you lay it out. Now, they're not going to do it the same as you. Joshua didn't do it the same as Moses. Fundamentally, the relationship with the Lord is the same. Love God with all your heart and soul and mind. But the way he did things was different. Nathan's going to change things and do things. One of the things is I said, do you want to change anything in the stage while I'm still here? Do it. And he started doing it and brought it from the 70s into the 2000s, and allowing him to do that with no interference. So you could start to watch the process of how he thinks, and to encourage him in those areas to not change too quickly so you don't rattle the sheep. You're going to say, okay, no more Sunday night, or we're going to have a Sunday night. Be in the pulpit for a while before you rattle the cage on that, and make some definitive things. You go, what's going on here? You don't want to do that, but you need to spell out what you think is important. Have those talks, go over those things that you just take for granted, but he doesn't have a clue why you've done certain things. You might be a very evangelical pastor or missions-oriented pastor, where you've gone here and gone there all the time in missions, and he's not, but he's got those around him that are. Or he might be more missions-minded than you, or more evangelical than you, or you're more, teach the word, and evangelize, do the work of an evangelist. Whatever he is, trust that Joshua is molded by God for the next generation. You're not. I've already watched Nathan talk and say something like hashtag blessed or something. And I thought I would never say that. I still don't know what hashtag means. But the next generation needs to have that baton passed in such a way that nobody's shook up about it. That you're still there. They see you at church, and they also see this other pastor now taking more and more of the roles in counseling, in administration, the paperwork, in the services. So I had him do sunrise, had him do Easter, had him count to Thanksgiving, same thing, and then Christmas. So they saw that. And then the New Year's, did the New Year's service, and then the next day I asked the elders to come, and we laid hands on him and prayed for him for that purpose and plan of God to begin the process of being the senior pastor. I'm still here, so the sheep aren't going like, oh, wait a minute. They know it's a foundation, and that's not being torn down, but being built upon in the way that the Lord would have it, like Paul did with Timothy. I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't think there's one set pattern. I believe that's why it's kind of generic in the New Testament when you go through it, but it should be biblical in the sense of the pattern we see, like with Moses and Joshua and Paul and Timothy. I'm just doing this study for the simple reason to stir up in you, not to be your therapist, like I said, but to stir up in you the concept of it is going to happen. How do I do it? Now, for you might be thinking, well, I'm 70 and I'm healthy. I'm going to do it till I'm 80. You see Charles Swindoll or some others that might have done that, and some that have died in the pulpit. I think you need to find what's good for you and good for the body, and that might be 6 months from now, 2 months from now, might be 5 years from now. But start making the plans. So fundamentally, again, going over with the body that it's always a plan to have somebody take your place if something happens, whether that's today or tomorrow. And they get used to that this is the replacement. And by the way, I'm going to have him teach this morning on, the doctrine of the Trinity or whatever you're going to do. But they get used to it. They already know that person anyway. They should have been a pastor that's been with you for years and whatever, but they're being raised up. And so that relationship with the body, you're not scattering the sheep. And then the administrative part, start turning some of those things over and turning funerals over and weddings over and other things that are fundamental to the aspect of the church, and communion service. He's done several communion services in the last 3 years for that specific reason. For me, I wanted the body to feel close to him in relationship with the Lord. Look at those things that are important to you and have them be a part of that, and even instituting new things, like maybe he does the Wednesday night study, or he does this, something different, where they're comfortable with his presence constantly in that role of leadership. And then the administration, like I said, the checks, the administrative authority and responsibility with the board. I had him come in as a guest on the board, just to listen, to see how it works, how it's functioning. And then when one person left the board, just out of maturation, and they said, I got a lot of things going on right now. Do you mind if I step down? Not at all. I went to Nathan and said, Nathan, who would you like to appoint? Who would you like to bring in? And I agreed with the person completely. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what I would do. But he's also a part of the next generation in some ways, and a little bit of a bridge. And more, he's going to want some younger people. But allowing him that place. And now he takes my role completely on the board of directors, and I've stepped down from that. But you've got to think it through. It shouldn't be a shock. You don't want to scatter the sheep. Too often bodies fall apart because there's been no thought process of how that's going to happen. And, that kind of concept, I'm going to die in the pulpit. Well, the sheep don't want to see you get that sick in the pulpit and coughing all over them and everything else. You use some wisdom. We have the example here. So administratively, then with the board, dialoguing with them. And so it's not like, next Sunday I'm leaving. I've done this over a 3-year process. And then the last year more intense, last 3 months more intense, to the point of, having him, having not only him being presented to the body, but what I did was I then did a study on Hosanna, what we're about, where we've been, what we've done, what the Lord's work is in that, then what the Lord's work has been in me, in the relationship to the body and to Jesus, and how thankful I am for the people in the body that are doing the work of the ministry and laying out how that works, and the structure of Hosanna, me personally, and then the body. And then I reiterated that Nathan is the one to take my place. So there was a presentation to where the body is quite comfortable with it. And then I let them know, he's now my pastor. We have a mutual respect for each other. And I've been his pastor for years. And he's now, I respect him enough and God's work in his life that he's my pastor. And it's not like, well, I would have said it this way or done it that way. He's speaking God's word, and he's speaking it through him and the way he does it. And can't ask for anything more than that, because I know he loves the flock. I know he loves the Lord. That's the person that you want. And the board is in agreement. He's ready, and now the church is ready. And so the transference, we haven't seen families say, oh, well, I'm going to go somewhere else now because Pastor Gary isn't there. And I've seen that with churches. I've seen churches go through some real upheavals, and it's just not necessary, I don't think, when you've got people you've raised up and they know, and you bring them into eldership, and then that pastor. And it took some while and took some thought. And I had no real format for it. So I'm just trying to give you an outline, a thought process of being prepared to lay that out. There are other pastors that you might talk to that have been there and done that, and they could help. This presentation is just to say, I've walked this through for the last 3 years. I don't know, when the Lord's going to take me, but I've always thought, well, it could be this year. So it's always been a process of looking for the Lord's return. But to present that to the body in that relationship, that they know you're discipling somebody else, that's a process I hadn't seen. And I can tell you it works. There's just such a smooth transition, and I watch people now come up to him instead of me and say, you help me? I'm in this and that, and they start talking, and I think, all right, that's exactly the way it should be. that Joshua has his Caleb's, and just that work to where you cross now that Rubicon, and it's for the next generation. And he's tech savvy and all the other things, and we've tried to, for me personally, tried to keep up with it, but to have somebody that's just part of their blood, that's the next generation. I still come to the pulpit with my Bible, and he's got an iPad, and I've tried that, and I just can't make it work. Maybe you can, but there's just other things that people are comfortable with that change, and how you speak and references that you make that they might not get. I made a reference this morning to one of the people in the body here, a young lady who's a deaconess, and I said, "Do you know the Rat Pack of Sinatra and Dean Martin?" And I was trying to make a reference to something. She looked at me like, were they astronauts? Did they go to the moon or something? No, I forget. But the new people that are there that the next generation is growing up with, I really don't have a clue. And I don't try to be something I'm not. I don't think Moses did. I don't think Paul did. But he said to Timothy, you preach the word in season. You be prepared. You go forward. And I just so grateful for Pastor Chuck Smith and the work that God did in his life and how many Calvaries there are in the fellowship with all the Calvaries. But I have seen some of the ones having the difficulty of this transferring. And so I just wanted to encourage you that think it through, face it, realize your age, the timing, and just say, Lord, how do you want me to do it? Administratively, with the church, and then with yourself. Financially, looking at all of those areas too, and dealing with the board. When I say deal with, I mean, you need to sit down and talk to them about it. Say, this is the process I want to go through. This is where I'm at with this. Because you want the cohesiveness with the body. And then the presentation of that person after, you've dialogued, it's the right one, to the body. And not, okay, I'm gone, they're there. Make it a process, however you want to work it out. But I just want to encourage you that I've entered into that reluctantly, but I've entered into it and worked through it and seen that it works. You can have a smooth baton pass. I ran track for a while, in high school, decades and decades and decades ago. It's a whole lifetime, right? But if you don't pass the baton right, it falls to the ground, hits her leg, or you bump into somebody. There's a smooth transition, and the person, they don't even have to look back. They just reach back, they've got it, and they start running. And I thought, that's what I want, and that's what I'm seeing. And I want to encourage you, think it through, administratively, with the board, with the body, and with you, and lay it out and allow God to give you the insight and the wisdom for how it works for your church. But it's inevitable. So whether you're starting like I did when I was 40 years old, every year just making that simple awareness of it, or if it's like, oh, I just found out I've got cancer, I've got to work through this thing now. Whatever the issues are, whatever place you're in, God's box of fear is empty. And so should yours be. Just enter in, face it, be encouraged by it. I pray that the Lord would, for all of us that are going through that process, would enrich us in the relationship of looking really forward to that mountaintop experience with the Lord, that final one that Moses had, about without fear, and with the knowledge that you've passed the baton effectively, thoroughly, and safely, and he doesn't even have to look back. He knows he's got it, and he's off to the races, and the body will be blessed as you will be. Here, there, or in the air. God bless you.